Welcome to Discovering. With the big Pine Mountain ski jumping competition coming up this weekend, I thought I'd sit down and talk with an 87-year-old ski jumping legend.
At 18 when I made my first world team, and then I just continued after that, 58, 62, 60 Olympics.
Plus, we learn about spearing for Northern Pike.
Waiting for that one just to make its way in the hole.
So sit back and relax. It's Monday night, and it's time for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill, the eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of Northern Michigan.
If jigging lures through an 8-inch hole or tip-up fishing isn't your thing, but you still want to sit on the ice and make fishing more like hunting, then maybe give spearing for pike a try. I met up with Chris Schroeder of Unpopular Outdoors to learn more about pike spearing.
Oh, there's a fish that just hit it. You see that? There's one down there.
As soon as Chris dropped the decoy down, a pike hit it.
It just hit the decoy.
But we weren't ready yet. To be able to see down the hole, your spearing shack needs to be as dark as possible, but since we're making TV here, we did have to leave a window cracked open.
When we have it dark in here, you can get away with more movement. Today, since we're filming, we want a little bit of light. We'll see what happens, but it is a lot like deer hunting in the sense that sometimes the slightest movement will spook the fish, and other times you can stand up and yell, and you don't have to be quite as quiet, and they just sit there. So everyone's a little bit different.
To go pike spearing, obviously, you need the gear, but there's not really a lot you need.
It's like any other hobby. You can make it as fancy or not as you want. Having a shack is going to be important. You've got to be able to keep light out of the hole. There's probably a lot of old timers watching right now saying that you can't do it out of a hub shack. It's got to be a homemade, blacked out ice shack, but you can make whatever work. You know, you want to keep as much light out as you can. You've got to have a way to make a hole in the ice big enough to spear a pike. I prefer to use my auger and drill 4 holes in the corners, and then I've got an ice saw that I use to cut the rest of it out. I try to also think about where I'm at. You know, you're not going to want to go cutting a spearing hole in an area where there's a ton of people going to be going through. You want to mark your hole when you leave, make sure it's safe, nobody's walking in there. But at the same time, you still don't want to be cutting a big old hole where people are going to be. But there's no right or wrong answer on size of the hole. You need a spear, lots of different kinds of spears, some way to tie it off, and some kind of a decoy to get them in the hole. There's lots of different decoys, or just a sucker minnow, whatever you want to use.
Chris had a combination of both a decoy and live bait.
So I like to do two rods like this, where we have a decoy just kind of hanging out. We can jig it every now and then if we want, and then I also like to have this sucker down there just moving around. He does have a hook on him, so if a fish happens to come in and hit it, we can land it on the rod. And I've got him on it's called a sucker saver. It's a short piece of line with a hook on the bottom. You put the minnow in between the 2 pieces of string, and then you pinch down with a bobber stop above the minnow. So there's actually not a hook through it. So if we didn't catch a fish, we could bring them up, take them out of there, and use them again another day, which is kind of nice. you know, obviously the closer you can get the fish to the surface, the easier it is to spear. But anytime I'm pike fishing, whether I'm spearing or setting tip-ups or just fishing for pike, I like my bait to be probably, you know, a third of the way up off the bottom, no matter how deep I'm fishing.
Pike spearing through the ice is open December 1st through March 15th on all UP waters, with the exception of designated trout lakes and trout streams.
Early in the year, I like to be shallow as like 4 or 5 feet. As it goes later into the year, I'll move out a little bit deeper. You really have to pay attention to water clarity. You're not going to spear many pike if you can't see them down in the hole. But if you can get on the edges of weeds or logs or, you know, rocks, it's no different than fishing anything else.
Other than that first pike to hit the decoy before we were fully set up, and another that took the sucker minnow, our fish tank was pretty quiet.
Patience is definitely a big part of it.
I'm right-handed, so I like to have my spear on my right side. So that would be one thing to consider when you're setting up your shack, how you want to throw it. I do like to, because we're in a hub shack and it doesn't have a floor, I do like to keep it on a piece of wood. There's been times where after you get your spear wet and then you set it in here and it's just sitting on the ice where the tines can build up ice and they're you know, not going to be as sharp. So I like to keep it on a piece of wood. When we do have a fish come in, I like to grab it maybe a little higher than mid shaft. Slowly stick it in the water. You don't want to make a big splash, and you're not like throwing the spear down the hole. You're setting it in the water. You want to be up and down if you can. You can throw it sideways, but adds a degree of difficulty. And then you're just kind of straight down with it. You're not, like I said, you're not coming up and making a big splash. You're just gently setting it in, getting it over top of the fish, ideally right behind the head, and sending it down.
Eventually, out of nowhere, a pike appeared and took that sucker minnow just as Chris speared it. You need quick reflexes with these fish today. Many lakes in the UP have a minimum northern pike size of 24 inches, so it is important to be able to judge the fish's size before spearing it.
When you spear one, it's not catch and release. You're not going to put it back down the hole, so it's pretty important to pay attention to that. I like to judge off the size of the decoys that I have in the water. You know, if you know that you've got a 10 or a 12-inch decoy down there and you see a fish that swims by it, that's the best way to tell. Like we talked earlier, there are some lakes here in Marquette County where there's no size limit on pike. So if you're just getting into it and you want to try it out and you're a little bit nervous about judging the size, that's a good way for you to go.
We had one pike who was more stealthy and slowly approached the bait, giving us time to get it on camera and send the spear.
I missed it.
Chris was bummed to miss that one, but I thought it was just as cool to watch the pike through the ice.
A couple of them today didn't give us much of a chance. They came in, smashed the decoy, or stole our sucker before we even knew there was a fish down there. But we got lucky on one and not so lucky on another one. I do guided trips if that's something you want to, you know, check us out and get out and do some spearing. But that's not really my primary focus. I really wanted just to create some kind of a platform to help promote hunting, fishing, trapping, pike spearing, some things that, you know, aren't as popular anymore as what they used to be. Everybody tells me Unpopular Outdoors is kind of a strange name for a guiding business or somebody who's trying to promote these things, and I agree. I did that just as a daily reminder to myself, just to really remember what I'm doing, what I want to promote, and what I want to do, and yeah, that's who we are.
The 2025 FIS Continental Cup at the Pine Mountain Ski Jump in Iron Mountain begins this Friday. This 3-day international ski jumping competition brings in top ski jumpers from around the world to the Western UP year after year, and it draws a crowd of spectators unlike any other. Pine Mountain is known throughout the world as one of the best jumping hills, and the Kiwanis Ski Club, who puts on the event, one of the top jumping clubs in the United States, creating Olympic caliper ski jumpers throughout its history.
And there's other Olympians in town here, which is amazing.
I visited one of those local ski jumping legends, 87-year-old Willie Erickson, to hear stories about his glory days as an Olympic athlete and 3-time U.S. national ski jump champion.
What was your best jump at Pine Mountain, do you remember?
Yes, I do. The big number at Pine Mountain was 300 feet, okay? Nobody had ever jumped 300 feet. And this was in 1955. And I was still in high school. And I jumped 295. And Rudy Mackey, my buddy, jumped 300. That was the first 300-foot jump made in the country. So that was a jump that, you know, I guess you'll always remember.
At the age of 9, it was already obvious that Willie had a natural talent.
This group of junior jumpers will one day produce classy competitors for top flight honors in the major meets. You already know Willie Erickson. Willie's on his way in a skiing sequence of young stars on the rise.
My first pair of skis, my dad built me. You know, the Finns are very famous for woodworking, whittling and making things. He made my first pair of skis, made out of hickory boards, and carved them. Back in those days, the tips of the ski had a little point coming up on them, if you remember the old days. We grew up in a neighborhood here in Kingsford, Iron Mountain. We had many different ski jumps all over different east side of town, north side of town, west side of town. We used to have just little hills where you jump 30, 40 feet, you know, and have competitions, and back then collect all the Christmas trees and build ski jumps all over and have a ski meet. And on that one where they did the movie, we used to block off one street because we went across the street to get to the takeoff to jump onto the landing hill. You know, I remember winning my first ski jump. I was 9 years old and I won a 15-cent bottle of shellac. It was thought to put on the bottom of your skis to make them go faster. 15-cent bottle of shellac, you know. I mean, that was a big thing back then. We always had foreign skiers coming to our competition here, and I remember the Finns, they dominated ski jumping back then, and Matti Pietikainen and Leo Laakso and some of the big names. Boy, I want to be like him, you know, that was the thing. And I was impressed by the skiers would come to our schools, elementary schools, and just chit-chat like we're doing, and some of them were musicians. They played accordions and played different things, and we'd tell stories about ski jumping, and that always impressed us. You had to be 16 to be able to jump on Pine Mountain, so that's when it all started. And then right away I got pretty good at it. 18 when I made my first world team, and then I just continued after that, 58, 62, 60 Olympics. 1957 was probably my most successful year in ski jumping, and I'll tell you why. I was in good shape because I went to Northern Michigan and I played football. And in 1957, that winter, I won 10 out of 11 meets that I jumped in. There's the Chicago Medal of Honor. You see that top picture there? Mm-hmm. I was awarded the Chicago Medal of Honor. That was a big thing back then. And it's for the top skier of the entire competition. And the Norway Ski Club always brought in foreign skiers. And it was a big deal to go to compete in the Norway ski jump because the best in the world were always there. 1958 was my first trip to Europe. We were going to the World Championships in Lahti, Finland, And there were 3 of us from Iron Mountain that made the team. And that was kind of history, 3 from one ski club. And back then, DC-3 was the biggest plane that flew in Iron Mountain. And they picked us up here at Ford Field. And Rudy Mackey's the guy on the left. He lived in Ishpeming at the time. And that was, the plane was so small, we had to put our skis in the aisleway. And other passengers had to step over our skis to get us to Chicago. That's poetry in motion, okay? That's 1959 National U.S. Champion in Leavenworth, Washington. But you see those skis, they're perfect. You see my hands at my side, they're perfect. And nothing moves. From takeoff to landing, that was the gracefulness of the sport.
Willie made the 1960 U.S. Olympic team in Squaw Valley, California.
In Squaw Valley, I fell. See that ring? That's an Olympic ring. And they tell you, once an Olympian, always an Olympian. The best I ever done was 16th in the World Games in 62 in Zakopane, Poland. 62 World Games, I was the flag bearer, I was captain of the team, marched in a stadium with 80,000 people bearing the U.S. flag, you know, the March of Nations, you know. Back then, the Olympics and the World Championships were held every 4 years, but they were in alternating years. So I was on the 58 team, the 60 Olympic team, the 62 World team, and then I stayed in Finland because back then you had to come home to try out to make the team for the following year. And I decided to stay in Europe. So
there was a reason Willie stayed in Finland.
How did I meet her? In 1962, the World Championships were in Zakopane, Poland. And we had a 6-man team, coach and a manager. Our coach was Finnish. And he decided to bring the team into Finland to train with the Finnish ski jumpers before going on to the World Championships in Zakopane, Poland. And it was there in Kuopio, Finland, that I met my wife. She ran a mountain lodge for the city of Kuopio, and it was a ski resort. She was greeting us at the door, and, you know, I guess looking back, I think it was kind of love at first sight.
Willie and his wife Maya moved back to the U.S. and over the years built many successful businesses, including Willie's own line of skis.
When I came back from Finland, I was in different businesses, as I told you, and then I decided to get into the ski business. I had about 7 businesses going. I thought one more won't hurt. And I had a few pair left. These were my wife's. I had a pair. My son's got a pair.
The Lahti Ski Games beckoned Willie and his ski jumping friends back to Finland.
When we go to Lahti, we always, we're quite well known in Lahti. We're called the Lahti 5.
Every year, same time. Every year, same time. You bet. Thank you.
We were all former Olympians, or world-class skiers, world championship skiers. 3 of us jumped in the World Championships in 1958 in Lahti, Finland. And in 78, Lahti had the games again. So that's when our pilgrimage started, that myself and Rudy and Coy Hill and Dr. Jacobs in town, and there were 5 of us. For 25 years, without missing a year, we made it back to Finland. That was our guaranteed trip. That was what we were going to do, and as long as we could do it, and as long as we were alive, and it was a blessing for all of us.
Like the ski jumpers who visited his elementary school and inspired him, the Lahti 5 visited school children in Finland.
Work hard, enjoy life, The key to all of that is education.
A lot has changed in ski jumping since Willie's heyday.
Styles change, everything changes, you know. Ishpeming. First time we Antti Hyväläinen, the gold medal winner of the '56 Olympics, him and I battled it out for the ski jump record. I was younger then too, and I jumped early on. I jumped 250 feet. He jumped 251 feet. But that's as big as the hill was back then. Now look at the beautiful, that's Ishpeming Tower up there. And now they jump 100, 115 meters on Ishpeming jump. So, you know, time marches on. You know, it's just, it's amazing. It's, you know, I grew up in the right era, I think. Just doing what I did and having fun doing it. Because that's part of it also, is having fun. If you don't have fun doing what you're doing. But I looked at it this way, how else would a little punk, 18 years old, get to jump on a plane and fly all over? And I got to see the world.
That's all for tonight, and I hope to see you right back here next week for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.